Now, can you hear me now? I've taken the microphone out. If you couldn't hear me, you won't have known what I was saying, which is that the microphone issue is a Facebook problem rather than me. Okay, thanks Belinda. All right, so I'm going to go without the microphone again. I did a test about an hour ago in a Facebook Live that is just private to me. And when I did that last week, I had the same problem with the sound that I'd been having. When I did it this morning, the sound was absolutely 100% perfect with my microphone in. So I thought, great, Facebook have fixed it, because it is a Facebook issue. It's not my microphone, and a number of other demonstrators have got the same issue. But obviously not in this time or this afternoon. Belinda's saying it's great now. Excellent. Thank you, Belinda. It's really infuriating because the microphone on my phone is okay, but it's quite directional. So if I move my head about much, which I do tend to do when I chat to you, the sound wavers. It's not very consistent and it can be a little bit faint. But I have confirmed it's a Facebook issue with external microphones for some bizarre reason that is completely beyond my understanding. My microphone is testing absolutely fine, and I did test it in a group about an hour ago. The microphone was working fine. It obviously was not now. So we will go without the microphone. Thank you very much for the helpful comments. It's infuriating, but there's nothing I can do about it. It's a Facebook issue. I have checked with one of the demonstrator IT gurus, and yeah, it's Facebook. It's not me. It's not my kit. So we will just work with what we've got. So how is the weather with you? Is it as bad with you as it is with me? It's been raining for 24 hours now. I reckon we've had about 3 inches of rain, which is extraordinary really for June. Catching up, I think, after all the dry weather. The pond has raised the level nearly to the lawn, so we're going to be flooding that if it continues to rain. My husband was supposed to be helping at the opening of a preview of an outdoor sculpture exhibition this evening. Not surprisingly, that is not going to be happening now, which is a great shame. I hope it bucks up for Father's Day on Sunday. At least in the UK, it's Father's Day on Sunday. So I'm hoping for some nice weather then. So let me say a few hellos, which I haven't done yet. Hello to Maureen, and to Mary, and to two Belindas, Belinda A and Belinda G. You are all very welcome. Thank you so much for joining me on this very unpleasant wet Friday afternoon in the middle of the British summer. So yes, there we go. I have got a window open because despite the fact that it's tipping with rain, it's quite muggy and warm inside, and I've had to put my lights on because it's not very bright and they create an awful lot of heat. So I'm hoping that the kind of outdoor sound is not creeping in and being disturbing. If it is, let me know and I will shut the windows, but I'm hoping I can keep them open. Mary's saying hello to everybody, and I can see there's a few other people watching, but their names have not come up, so if I haven't name checked you, forgive me. If you would like me to say a proper hello to you, do pop a little comment in and I will be very happy to do so. So in a moment when I put the camera down, I'm going to show you 1 or 2 things and do some crafting. Today is all about heat embossing. For those of you that wanted to craft along, I did post quite a long list of what I'll be using in the Facebook event for today. And I did also put up some photos of approximately what I will be doing, just to give you a bit of an idea. I know those of you that like to craft along like to know exactly what I'm going to be using and what you're going to need to have by you. But as an alternative, I suggested you might want to do just some colouring or some fussy cutting. So do let me know if you're going to craft along, whether or not you're going to follow me. I'm always interested to know what you're doing while I'm chatting away to you. So I made some notes on all the things that I need to remember to chat to you about. One of them is my week. I like to tell you what I've been doing this week, mainly because I really hope it'll prompt you to tell me what you've been doing, because your weeks are usually much more interesting than mine. However, this week was lovely because I did have a meeting with my fantastic team. We used to meet in person back in the day when you could do things like that easily. Then we obviously went online over the course of the pandemic, and actually my team is geographically a lot more dispersed than it was 18 months or 2 years ago. So working online has actually been really good, because those people that live a long way away and couldn't come for an in-person meeting have been able to join in, whether they join in live on Facebook or whether they watch the meeting afterwards on YouTube. They get an exclusive link to the live meeting, but the recorded version. I also send out a whole package of crafting bits and pieces, and we do some crafting together. And I thought actually I would show you the projects in a minute when I turn the camera down. So I will be showing you those as well. So that was really, really nice. One of the best things about becoming a Stampin' Up! Demonstrator is the fact that I've made so many friends. I have friends all over the world, many of whom I've managed to meet in person at Stampin' Up! Events. But also I have virtual friends, as it were, but over time you do get to know people quite well. But it's also really lovely to have made local friends. Some of those local friends have moved away, some of them have stayed local. And in fact, on Monday afternoon we did have a team social where we all met outside on the forest. I took cake and we chatted. In the event, lots of people couldn't make it, so we were very small and select group. But it was absolutely lovely to be able to do that, and as I say, joining Stampin' Up! I would never have met most of these people. I'm just trying to think if I would have met any of them. I don't think I would have met any of the people who are in my team were it not for Stampin' Up! And I count them among my very best friends now. Some people I've known for 8 or 9 years now. It's been fantastic. So if you needed yet another good reason to join Stampin' Up!, then that's one of them. You'll meet lovely friends. Some will live close to you, some won't, but you have a connection through crafting, which works whether it's online, down the phone, or in person. So if you'd like to know any more about joining Stampin' Up!, just let me know. There are so many nice benefits to Stampin' Up! The friendship is a big one for me, probably the biggest one. But I do really love getting a 25% discount on everything I buy. The starter kit is great value. I love the events. I'm attending an event virtually this year in August, and then another one later in the year as well, where we will get all kinds of tutorials and business training and fun activities and previews of new Stampin' Up! Things coming our way. So I really love the events as well. And actually I've increased my personal skills quite a lot since I joined Stampin' Up! Too. I've learnt all kinds of things that I don't think I would have learnt otherwise had I done other kinds of jobs. So yeah, it's been great. Right, a reminder please to like and share this. It helps me so much, and a huge thank you to those of you who do that. Some of you do it every single week, and I really am very grateful. If you can like and share this, it helps me to get seen by other people who might be interested but haven't yet found me. So if you can hit the share button, doing it now is great. Otherwise, doing it at the end is also brilliant. So thank you in advance if you're going to do that. So Gillian is here. Hi Gillian. She says yes, wet day to you all. Isn't it wet, Gillian? You're a bit further away, so it's obviously raining with you as well. All right, some reminders. If you want to book the July card class by post, today is the last day to book. So I will close bookings at the end of today. But if you haven't booked and you would like to, it's not too late. Just let me know. With that class you get written instructions, photographs and materials kits for 6 different cards. If you live close by you can collect them from me if you would like, but I'm happy to post them to you anywhere in the country, or indeed in the European countries where Stampin' Up! Operates. So the class is £18, or you can order £28 worth of Stampin' Up! Goodies from me. Either online, or you can send me an email or give me a call and tell me what you'd like. There's postage on top for your goodies, although if you can pick them up from me it's just a £1 flat shipping fee. I'll post your class for free if you live in the UK, and yes, let me know by the end of today. The second reminder is about the last chance list. That's still running. That's your last chance to get the items from the spring and summer catalogue. That's the January to June mini catalogue. Everything that's not carrying over is while stocks last only. Quite a lot has sold out, but what remains, a lot of it is very discounted, even up to 50%. So if you haven't looked, or if you haven't looked recently, go to my online shop at sallybowman.stampinup.net and you can find all the last chance items there. But come the end of June the 30th, they're gone. That's it. So don't leave it too late. The hand-penned sweet sampler, I'm still taking orders for that. A lot of you have ordered already, but if you would like one, you have to book by the 25th of June, which is next Friday. So you've got 1 week left. In a minute when I turn the camera down, I will show you that again very, very quickly. The ribbon has now arrived, so I can actually show you properly the ribbon rather than just a picture, because that's all I had last week. The Pansy Petals class, which is 3 fancy cards and a gift bag. I need your booking for that by June the 25th, please. There's various options for that. You can have the basic class, which includes the Pansy patch stamp set. You can upgrade it to include the dies as well if you would like, and make sure that you get the bundle price on that, so you still save your 10%. Or if you've already got the Pansy stamps, you can choose something else to the same value as part of your class. And there are lots of extra bits and pieces that come with the class, as well as all the materials you need to make those cards. You just provide the ink pads. So if you'd like more information on that, let me know and I can email you out the information sheet. And last bookings are Friday next week. And that is all the reminders. Okay, let me have a quick look at the comments. I don't think I've missed anything. Okay, right, so I think I've seen all the comments so far, but if you have anything to say, let me know. Let me know if you're going to be crafting along with me today, whether you're doing heat embossing or something else. Let me know what your week has been like, and let me know if you've got any exciting plans for the weekend. I'm not doing anything much this weekend, which is quite nice, particularly if the weather's going to be dreadful, but let me know what you're doing. All right, I'm going to cover you over now. I'm going to turn the camera down, show you a few bits, and then get on with some crafting. So as always, I'm going to cover over the lens and I'll make the readjustments as quickly as I can, because it's not very exciting. Thank you, Maureen, for commenting on the sound. I'm really glad that you can hear it okay. It was a nightmare at the beginning, and I don't understand why when I tested the sound it was fine in one group but it is not fine in this group. But there you go. That's technology for you, isn't it? So probably we will be stuck with my telephone microphone for a few more weeks until Facebook sort out whatever glitch it is that's causing a problem with the sound. As I say, it's not my microphone. I've been making videos with that this morning. It's working absolutely 100% fine. Okay. Lorraine's joined us. Hi Lorraine, lovely to have you. Thank you so much for spending a wet Friday afternoon with us. Okay, in fact I can see, Lorraine, your comment has just jumped up the list, so you probably said hello a little while ago, but it's only just shown and then it suddenly jumped up to the right place. Right, so here we go. So this is the hand-penned sweet sampler. I'll show you very quickly the colours. So you get 6 sheets of A4 card. Blushing Bride, Garden Green, Pale Papaya, Mint Macaron, Daffodil Delight and Highland Heather. You get a quarter of a pack of the patterned paper. I think some of these are upside down, but never mind. I showed you properly last week, so I'm just kind of speeding through a bit. So that's one side. That's the other side. So you've got kind of watercolour washes on one side with patterns in white, and then on the other you've got these beautiful florals. And then you get 1 metre each of 3 different ribbons. Now I didn't have these last week, so I'm very happy to be able to show them to you properly this week. Actually, let me put them the other way around, and then they're in the order that I listed them. So there's a Highland Heather Grosgrain ribbon, and this actually has a sparkle in it as well, or shimmer perhaps is a better description. There's a Pale Papaya and white ribbon. This is, I don't think it's actually, they tell us it's linen, but it's got a linen look to it certainly. And this lovely, soft, strokeable Mint Macaron velvet ribbon. So I'm just going to lift those up to the camera as well and try and give you a better view of them. Let me just lay them across my silicone mat actually, which is, it's a bit of a battered one, but it's dark, so hopefully you can see those. Once my iPad catches up, I'll be able to see what you can see. There you go. So I'm hoping that you can see the texture and the pattern on those. So you get a metre of each of those ribbons, and then you get half a pack of the Genial Gems, which are these really super pretty faceted jewels. They're self-adhesive. They all have glitter in them, and half of them are pale papaya and half of them are mint macaron, so they're very pretty colours. So Belinda's saying she loves this paper because she thinks the reverse sides are just as usable as the fronts, which isn't always the case, but this is lovely, and she loves the gems too. Yeah, I completely agree with you, Belinda. So there we go. So that's a very quick look at this month, well, July's sweet sampler. I'm offering it out this month, but it will be sent to you in July. So that is £12 if you can collect it from me, or £14 if you would like me to post it to you. So I just charge at cost for the board-backed envelope and second-class standard postage. And the price you pay for the items, I basically just work out what the catalogue price is. I do then round it up to the nearest pound, so you're not paying over the odds for these at all. But I need to know by a week today, Friday the 25th, if you would like one of these, please. So you can just email me, handmadeathome@hotmail.co.uk, or pop a message underneath, and I will order you one. Right, so that's that. Then I thought I would just show you quickly what we made in our team meeting. So we used the Simply Elegant suite. We made a box. Now I did not design this box. This was designed by another Sally, a demonstrator called Sally Shaw. She lives in the UK. You can find her at sallystampers.com. Sally Stampers, all one word. But I really loved this box. Those of you who know me well know that I tend to be a bit 3D challenged, so occasionally I come up with something 3D, but I struggle. However, Sally Shaw obviously does not, so she designed this really fun box where the sides fold in and then it folds up like that. So I made that with my team. We also made a fancy fold card. So this, let me move that up. This has a belly band on it. And then it opens out like this. So you have lots of places to showcase patterned paper. I actually came up with this fold myself, so I'm very proud of it. I haven't given it a name yet, so if any of you have got any bright ideas as to what I could call that fold, please let me know. And then we also made a fairly plain card, but a useful one because you can use up odd pieces of patterned paper on it. So that's what I made in my team meeting this month. Every month we make several projects, and as I say, I provide a kit for all of them, so we have a lot of fun as a team. Right. I don't know if you can hear that rain. It's absolutely falling down. I can see it coming out of the gutters. The gutters are overflowing. In fact, it's so windy that some of the rain is actually blowing out of the gutters. So Belinda is saying, am I going to offer a sample of Simply Elegant? She doesn't want the whole suite, but after the team meeting, she'd like some of the paper. I'm going to offer a sample. I'd wait for that. Yes, Belinda. And actually, thank you for feeding me my next point, which is absolutely brilliant. I'm just going to lean across to the wall where I've got my list of when the samplers are coming up, and I will tell you. In fact, the Simply Elegant is going to be the next sampler, so I'll be telling you all about it in July and showing you, and then it will be posted out or available for collection in August. So yes, I will be offering a sampler for that with some of the paper and some coordinating card and embellishments. So yes, you might like to wait for that. Thank you for the question. All right, so I'm going to talk about heat embossing. I've opened up my catalogue here at pages 128 and 129, just to show you where all the bits and pieces for heat embossing can be found. You need a few bits of specialist kit if you're going to be doing heat embossing, but they're not hugely expensive, and they will last a really, really long time. So the first thing you need is something to provide the heat, which is here, the heat tool. I'll show you mine in a minute and I'll tell you a little bit about it. You also need some embossing powder, which is shown here. Embossing powder is made of, I don't know what, some kind of plastic material or something that melts anyway. It's a powder. If you think about fine glitter, it's kind of like that texture, but it's not sparkly. It actually looks quite dull until it's heated. It comes in these little pots, and we have two different options for those in the catalogue. So there's one which we're calling the basic set, which gives you the 3 colours of black, white and clear powder. And there's a metallics set, which is copper, gold and silver. So you get three colours in each. And the other thing you're going to need to heat emboss is a slow drying ink pad. Versamark is absolutely perfect. You can get a refill for it as well. And it's a clear ink. You can use it for other techniques as well. You don't have to keep it just for heat embossing, but it's very slow drying, and what that means is that you have time to tip on the embossing powder once you've stamped using this ink, tip off the excess just as if you were attaching glitter to glue, and then heat it. With our normal coloured ink pads, they dry so fast that the embossing powder can't stick to the ink, but with Versamark they can. Now the other item that you're going to really ideally have if you want to do heat embossing is something called an embossing buddy. Now Stampin' Up used to supply these, we don't anymore, but you will find them on eBay and Amazon. It's a little cloth bag filled with powdered chalk, like talcum powder. And it's used just to remove static electricity and any oil from your fingerprints and so on from what you're working on. I think these left the catalogue because they last for such a long time. I've got one that I've had, it's just about finished now, but I've had it for about 15 years. And I do quite a lot of heat embossing, and it's just lasted and lasted and lasted. And I think they were sitting in the warehouse because once you've got one, you don't need to order another one. Despite the fact that technically it's a consumable item, it will eventually not have any of the talc left inside it, but they do last for such a long time. But you can find these elsewhere, find them online. Embossing Buddy is what it's called, or you might find it called an anti-static bag. But these are really useful, and you'll see me use that in a minute. A couple of safety bits of equipment. These are optional, but I recommend them. One is some kind of heat-proof working surface. If you're going to lay down your card and then heat it, what you're working on top of is going to get hot. In this case, I've got paper and I've got a tabletop underneath. Now to protect those, you need some kind of heat-proof mat. You might want to use an old wooden chopping board. A silicone craft sheet is perfect. So I recommend one of those. And I also recommend a peg, because with this you can grip hold of whatever it is that you're going to be heat embossing and hold it, keeping your hand a safe distance from the area you're working from. The heat tool gets hot enough to very badly burn your skin. It gets hot enough to melt your hair. So you do need to treat it with a little bit of respect. And just clipping on with a wooden clothes peg, now wood obviously does not conduct heat, or at least it won't while you're heat embossing, will keep your hand well away, and also you're holding on to something that isn't going to burn. If you use metal tweezers, you'll find that the tweezers will also get hot and you will burn your fingers. Belinda says she found the Embossing Buddy useful for taking the static off acetate when making shaker cards. Yes, it has other uses as well. You're quite right, Belinda. Thank you for pointing that out. Belinda has also had to move out of her conservatory. She can't hear well with the noise of the rain on the roof. She's in her living room now. And yes, absolutely, Belinda, you can order the sampler next month. So Jackie's got toast removers from Lakeland. Oh yes, I've got a pair of those. It's like a pair of wooden tongs that you can slide into your toaster to remove your toast, and they are excellent. So they will work really well. And hi Jackie, yes, hi. Don't worry if you missed the start, you can catch up later. Just so you know, Jackie, you'll want to fast forward just through the first couple of minutes of today, because despite me testing it with a microphone just before I came live, once again my microphone is not working, and I have ascertained that it's due to a Facebook fault. It's not due to a fault with my microphone. A lot of other demonstrators are having the same issue, so just fast forward and bear with me for that. Alright, so I'm going to just show you some heat embossing basics, just in case you haven't done it before, or in case you haven't done it for a while. So I'm unloading from my my little bucket here, and let's just do a little. This is how you heat emboss. So I'll probably pick up my card, so I don't necessarily need my heat-proof mat, but let's just pop it underneath. Belinda's got the toast tongs from Lakeland as well, and she hadn't thought about using them for heat embossing. Yeah, I think that's a brilliant tip. They're very inexpensive. I don't recommend you then use them to take your toast out, just in case you've got embossing powder left on them, but then they're so inexpensive you can probably have a couple of pairs, one for your toaster and one for your crafting. So Jackie says she's never been successful in embossing, she needs a bit more practice. Good, well I hope this will be helpful, Jackie. So a few tips then. So first of all, you can heat emboss on any kind of card. I always start off by rubbing my embossing buddy across this, or you can pat it gently. You will notice that you'll get a little bit of a deposit of, none's come off of course then, because let me say, if you pat really vigorously, there you go, I don't know if you can see on my finger, you'll get a little deposit of that powdered chalk that's inside, so don't go too wild, that will just brush off. However, I have probably now just really generated lots of static electricity on my card, so I'm just going to go over it again with the embossing buddy. Okay, what this does is it stops specks of embossing powder somewhere you don't want them, so it's really worthwhile locating one of those if you can. So then I'm going to stamp in the normal way. I've just got a thank you stamp here. So this is my Versamark ink pad. So I'm going to stamp. You won't see very much because I'm stamping with clear ink on white card, so visually it's not very appealing. I will tilt that just in case the light catches the stamping. I don't know if it will. I think it is just about. And then I'm going to tip on my embossing powder. Now the powder comes in just a little container, but I always put it into these plastic boxes. I pick these up at the pound shop. Any kind of plastic box is fine, but about this size. What does this measure? This measures just over 6 inches by just over 4 inches. What this does is it gives me a big surface area. I can tip the powder over my ink and tip it back in here, which I can't do if it's in a little pot. So it's much easier and much cleaner. And I just keep a spoon in here. So I'm just going to tip that onto my ink, tip off the excess. Now if I didn't have this in a big box, I would have to do this a bit like you have to sometimes with glitter, over a piece of paper, and then I'd have to tip it into the little container. So this is so much easier. And you can now see the powder has stuck to my stamping. And I also did chat a little bit before I put that embossing powder on, so you can see that the ink does stay damp for a good long time. Alright, so I'm now going to bring in my heat tool. So this has a stand on it. You can flick that down and then you can stand this up, and that will keep the tip off your work surface. And if you've been using this, the tip will stay hot for a while, so it will just mean that you don't burn anything you're working on. It's got an on-off switch here with 2 heat settings, 1 and 2. So 1 is cooler than 2. For heat embossing, you want to use number 2. Number 1 won't heat your powder sufficiently for it to melt properly. However, number 1 is really good if you're wanting to dry ink or paint, or you've been watercolouring and you want to dry it. But number 2 is the one you're going to want to use for heat embossing. This is from the hand-penned petals stamp set, Jackie. It's this one here. It is a lovely font stamp, isn't it? I really like it. Alright, so I'm going to turn this on in a second. I always just hold it well away from me and let it heat up for a moment or two, perhaps a minute. before I start working. And then when I start to heat this, you'll see that I hold the tool directing the heat. The heat comes out of this end, so do not put that end anywhere directed towards you, your arm, your clothes, your hair, your face, your hands. Keep that well away and just directed at your project. You'll see I hold it in one position and I move it slowly. It's really, really tempting with this because it sounds and feels a bit like a hairdryer to wave it around like this, and that's something which often causes problems with heat embossing, because when you do that you're heating the areas very unevenly. And the key with heat embossing is to hold the heat tool, wait until you see one particular area melt, and the minute you see that melt and it will go shiny and bright, move on to the next area, and the minute that melts, move on to the next area. So that's really a very, very good tip. If you overheat embossing powder, so if you continue to heat it after it has melted and gone shiny, what will happen is that it will then go dull, and then it will sink into your card because it's just got too hot. You can't retrieve that, you just have to start again. So never, never overheat it. So Jackie says that she uses heat setting number 1 for stamping onto tissue and then onto candles. Yeah, that's a great thing. That's probably a project for another time, isn't it, Jackie? Stamping onto tissue paper and applying it to candles is brilliant. All right, so I'm going to turn this on. So I've got it on heat setting 2 and I'm holding it well away from me. Actually, I've got it at arm's length, although you obviously can't see that. So I'm just going to let it heat up, simply because that means that when I bring it to my project, things will start to happen very, very quickly, and I'll also be much more able to predict how fast everything's going to heat. So because I can hold this card a long way away from where I'm going to be heating, I'm not going to bother with the peg. But let me bring in my heat tool. There we go. So that happened as quickly as that. And now I hope you can see that this is raised, shiny gold, and absolutely gorgeous. This dries really, really quickly. That is now dry. It's almost completely cool. But it's lovely. Now let me heat that a little bit longer and try and show you what happens when you overheat it. Okay, now you can see from how long that took that you do have a reasonable window for getting this right, and I'm really hoping that you can see the difference. I'll just tilt this a few times. So the T and the H and a part of the A are still raised and shiny and lovely, but as you work towards the end of the word, if I feel this, that is not raised anymore. It's flat, it's gone quite dull and has soaked into the card, and if I'd continued I would also have scorched the card. So that's what happens if you overheat it. As I say, I'm waiting for my iPad to catch up so I can see. I don't know if that's really showing up or not. I don't think it's showing very well. You might have to just take my word for it. Okay. I'm just going to show you very quickly how to heat emboss if you want to use a coloured ink. So let's say that I want to use Poppy Parade ink, but I want to heat emboss. Then the problem I'm going to have is that this Poppy Parade ink dries really, really quickly. And I'm just looking around for my clear embossing powder. Bear with me, it's on the floor. I'm just going to grab it out of the bucket. Okay. Now obviously if I use Poppy Parade ink with gold embossing powder, I'm going to end up with gold. So you need a clear embossing powder for this, but you can use the coloured ink pads as long as you've also got Versamark. And the trick is to ink your stamp with Versamark and then to ink it with the colour. Now the Versamark ink won't hurt your ink pad. Then I'm going to stamp, and I am going to be quite quick about getting clear embossing powder on there. This looks white, but it's actually clear because I have got some Versamark underneath, which will slow the drying time of the Poppy Parade ink, but you still have to work quite quickly. Now I don't know if you can see, but that red ink has dulled quite a lot because I've actually got Poppy Parade ink, embossing powder on top. So let me just heat that quickly. There we go. So again, it's not the easiest of things to show. If I just tilt this at some point, hopefully the light will catch it and you'll be able to see the shine on it. Jackie's saying she could see where I'd overheated the red, so that's excellent. So this is shiny, and it's now Poppy Parade embossing. So if you would like to do embossing that is in the colour of your ink pad, I'll just run through what you do again. So you ink your stamp using Versamark. You go straight to your coloured ink pad and ink it up. So you've now got 2 layers of ink on your stamp. Then you stamp and you tip on clear embossing powder and heat it. And that won't do your stamp any harm at all. It won't hurt your Poppy Parade ink pad either. And that way you can do raised, beautiful, shiny embossing in any colour that you happen to have an ink pad in. So I'm just going to clean off that stamp and get the red ink off it. Belinda's saying she could see that. Excellent. Okay. All right, I'm just going to pop the lid on this, and then I'm actually going to do a project that just really uses standard embossing, so nothing terribly complicated. All right, let's put Poppy Parade away. All right, so I'll show you the card that I'm going to make. Now this does actually use the Simply Elegant suite again. So what I've done is I have done gold embossing on patterned paper, and I've done black embossing on my sentiment. Candy's here. Hello Candy, nice to see you. I haven't done anything inside this yet. I will probably stamp something in it later. All right, so I've got my card kit here. Now this can be something that's fun to do on a fairly plain patterned paper. This paper actually is fabulous on the other side. Look at that. This is actually raised, this foiling, so it's a bit as if it's been embossed already. But I thought, okay, I'm just going to use the plain side. You can use any kind of patterned paper that's not got too dominant a pattern on it. So the first thing I'm going to do is to stamp on this. So I'm using the, I think this is called Elegantly Said in English. I ended up with with the French stamp set. Whoever picked my order put in this French version of the stamp set instead of something I'd ordered. I didn't order this. And Stampin' Up obviously corrected it, sent me the right one, but they did say they didn't need this back. So I have actually got this stamp set. And although I probably won't use the words, the images are exactly the same, whatever the language. So I'm using the images from this. This one is just so detailed. It's absolutely stunning. And it comes out beautifully. Belinda says she still struggles when embossing text, especially finer text, and you need more practice. A lot of it is practice, Belinda. Yes, make sure that your ink pad is inked really well so that you're getting enough ink on your stamp, and hopefully you will be fine. So this has got a great deal of very fine detail on it, so it'll probably be a good one to show you. Now, I've got to do this in stages. If I go back to this and show you, because I'm using clear ink, I can't see easily where I have stamped. So I will tend to stamp an image and heat emboss it, stamp the next one and heat emboss it, and so on. So bear with me if this takes a little bit longer than you might have been expecting. So the first thing I'm going to do is go over it with my embossing buddy. This really helps when you're doing fine detailed embossing, because it means that the embossing powder is only going to go where you want it to go. And then I've got my stamp here. So I'm going to make sure this has got a really good coating of Versamark ink on it. And I'm going to stamp, and you won't probably be able to see very much of this. No idea if that's showing up or not, but let me pour the embossing powder on and then you'll be able to see. Jackie says she likes the idea of adding embossing to patterned paper. Yeah, it's a really fun thing to do, Jackie. There we are. Now I've literally just tipped that on and tipped it off, and if I lift it right up, I'm hoping you can see that this very fine mesh work here, the powder has clung to it beautifully. It's ever such a fine embossing powder, the Stampin' Up ones, and it works beautifully. So let me heat that. Go. So you can see how quickly that heats, and it's absolutely beautiful, I think, this embossing. When I'm heating embossing powder, I always kind of tilt it in the light a little bit when I think I've finished, and if there are any areas that are dull, the likelihood is that I haven't overheated it, because I'm always careful, and that means that in fact that dullness is caused by the powder not having melted. So I just go over that bit with the heat tool. I'll try and show you that in just a minute if I can. Jackie's going, wow. I know, Jackie, doesn't it make a difference? It's lovely. This is one of my absolute all-time favourite techniques. I love lots of different inky techniques, but heat embossing just has something about it that really gives it a wow factor. Yeah, Belinda says she loves watching it as the heat suddenly turns it. Yeah, me too, Belinda. It's like magic. Okay, so I'm going to try and work fairly quickly through this. There's a little bit there I've missed getting the powder on. Tip some more on. And before I heat, I am just making sure I've got no specks of powder on the background where I don't want them. If I do, then I can just brush that with a fine paintbrush, but actually the embossing buddy's doing its job nicely. There we go. I forgot to leave a bit and show you how it looks before the powder is heated. I must try and remember to do that on this one. Alright, I'm turning the stamp a little bit. I'm not trying to get anything absolutely symmetrical on this. So you can see it would actually be quite hard for me to try and place the next one because I can't really see where I've stamped. So that's why I'm doing one image at a time. Right, I'll try and leave a little tiny bit of this unmelted just to show you what it looks like. I think I've managed it. So this little area here, I don't know if you can see, you get that really close and tilt it here. It's got a kind of a greyish look to it, not as shiny. I don't know if that's showing or not, but anyway, it just needs a little bit of heating. I've missed that bit. There we go. And perhaps one more image and we might be there. Or maybe we might need to do a little bit in that corner as well. Just going to, I've handled this a lot, so I'm just going to rub this with my embossing buddy just to be on the safe side. And I can do that little corner, I think, as well. There we go. Go. So that's my patterned paper already. So let me start to put the card together. I am just going to brush the powder off here. It does tend to go everywhere, even with a box like that, but it is so much easier than trying to get that excess powder back into a tiny little pot. There's not much glue left in there. Let's try this one. If you have any questions about heat embossing, do type them in and I will happily try to answer them. So I cut very narrow borders here, which is why I love this multi-purpose glue, because I can just slide that paper and get those borders beautifully even. Just going to drink some of my tea, which is probably cold by now. Not quite, but nearly. Now I've chosen to put an all over pattern on here, but you could of course, if you had, let's say, a flowered paper, you could just add something perhaps to the centers of the flowers. If you've got a stamp with little dots on it, you could stamp and emboss the centers of the flowers to add maybe some gold. Something like that. A lot of our papers have stamps which coordinate, so you could stamp over the top with a coordinating stamp and then emboss that image. Belinda's saying, can you heat emboss onto vellum? Yes, you can, Belinda. It looks absolutely gorgeous. White heat embossing on vellum is beautiful, and so are the metallics as well. So yes, you can. Stampin' Up vellum is a lovely heavy weight, so it embosses really, really nicely. Good question. All right, so moving on then, I've got this band across my card and then I've got a label here with the words heat embossed on there. So, oops, let me do that now. So this time I'm going to use black embossing powder. So again, I'll rub it with my embossing buddy, ink up my stamp, and then bring in my black powder. Ooh, I've got no spoon in that. I wonder where that ended up. Never mind, that will work. Now, I could have used clear powder with that and Versamark plus a black ink pad had I wanted to, but I've got black embossing powder. So once again, I'm only heating that until I can see it's all melted. So Belinda's saying she's thinking gold butterflies or dragonflies on vellum. That would be stunning, Belinda. Please make sure you show me a photograph when you have. So I've got my double oval punch here, so I'm just going to punch that out. It's always easier to have the words there first and then punch them out. There we go. And then I'm going to just punch a piece of gold foil to get the scalloped one. There we are. And now I can finish off my card. So I've got some more black card, just a strip, another piece of the paper. I played around with embossing this paper, but actually I decided I liked it left plain, and then some of the matte black dots added on rather than putting gold on it as well. It's a little bit long, that paper, so I'll just trim that off. And then I'm just going to stick this flat down the centre of my card. Stick my oval pieces together. And then I'm going to pop some dimensionals on the back of this. So Belinda says that she's going to try stamping on vellum. She's got a list of things she wants to try and some kits to play with. Fabulous. Well, I shall look forward to seeing everything when you finish, Belinda. There we go. And then I've just brought in some of these matte black dots. So these are self-adhesive. I really like them. I wasn't at all sure until I got some. And actually they're really useful because they're not really blingy. They're nice for men's cards, but actually I'm using them on all kinds of things as well. It's just nice to have something matte black. And there we go, that's my finished card. So do try heat embossing onto your patterned paper. You can really add your own personal little touch to it, or if you've got a really plain one that you think is just a bit boring and you can't find a use for it, then you can jazz it up no end. So let me put that to one side and bring in some different bits and pieces. So the next thing I thought I would show you is something I love to do with embossing. It's another one of those kind of magical moments, and that is emboss resist. So you can use the heat embossing to resist ink to give you a really interesting effect. So I'm just going to show you on here, and then I'm going to do a variation of it on a card. So I'm going to stamp and heat emboss in clear powder. You definitely want clear powder for this because you want the colour of your card to show through. So I've just stamped a dragonfly using Versamark ink. Again, it doesn't make for a great visual because it's clear on white, but once I've heated it and then finished the technique, it'll hopefully give you more of an idea. I don't know if you can see that or not really. You may not be able to. So this is clear embossing powder, so I'm just going to end up with a clear shiny image. There we go. I've also managed to drop a little pile of embossing powder on my desk, so let me get rid of that. Okay, so far so not very exciting. However, I I'm going to bring in a blending brush, and I've got my Coastal Cabana ink pad here. And you've seen me use these before. I'm just going to pick up some ink on that blending brush. Make sure it's well distributed in the bristles just by working it on either a bit of scrap paper, or I like to use a clear block. And then I'm just going to apply the ink over the top. And what's going to happen is that embossing is going to resist the ink. So can you see, all of a sudden, you can see that dragonfly appearing. And if I had used, oh, I don't know, pale green card underneath, and maybe then a darker green ink, my dragonfly would appear to be pale green against the darker green background, because the card underneath is protected by that embossing powder, and so the original card colour shows through. And then just the final finishing touch is just to buff up over the top of the embossing, because although the embossing powder resists the ink will bead up on top of it. There you can see there was ink sitting on top of that. So that is white, not because I used white embossing powder, because I didn't, I used the clear, but because you can see the colour of the card that's been protected from the blue ink by the embossing powder. So that's the emboss resist technique, which is really effective. You can play around with all kinds of colour combinations. So I'm going to do a bit of a variation on that, where you won't actually see the original colour of the ink, but the embossing powder will, sorry, the original colour of the card, but the embossing powder will still resist the ink. So here I've got a silver dragonfly against an inked and stamped background. So I'm using the Dragonfly Garden stamp set. I'm using the flower image and the dragonfly image, and I'm using the thank you stamp. I'm glad you liked that, Belinda. Alright, so here we go. So I've got a white layer just to layer onto, and I'm using a smaller white layer to actually do my work on. So the first thing to do is to place my dragonfly. Now I'm going to stamp these flowers after I've done the inking, but I'm just looking at whereabouts they will fit on there. So my dragonfly is going to kind of fit in that top corner, so that, yeah, that's all going to fit in fine. So the first thing is to use my embossing buddy all over the card to make sure that I don't end up with silver embossing powder where I don't want it. So then I'm going to stamp my dragonfly here and pour on some silver embossing powder, and actually I've still got my gold one here, look, with no lid on. That's really not sensible. Let's put that out of the way before we have a very messy incident. Okay, so bring in my silver embossing powder. Did I say hello, Andriana? If I didn't, my apologies, and you are very welcome. All right, so heat embossing, oops, is about to happen. Let me just, I had a little fleck of powder there where I didn't want it. Let's get rid of that. There we go. So that's my beautiful silver dragonfly. Now I'm going to ink the card. And I've completely, my brush, completely lost the blending brush for a minute. Now I could heat emboss this dragonfly on afterwards. There's no reason why I couldn't do that. I just wanted to talk about the emboss resist technique to you, and it does mean that I don't have to worry about getting perfectly even ink blending underneath something that I'm then going to cover up. Just going to hold this down with a tissue because the ink is still slightly wet, and I shall end up picking it up probably with my fingers and leaving fingerprints on here. Now I am going to be stamping over the top of this, so it doesn't have to be perfect, and actually I quite like a slightly uneven effect, so I think I'm going to stop at that point. It makes it a little bit more, I don't know, almost misty in the background. So then I'm going to polish off my heat embossing, so that's really shiny. And again, I don't know if you can see, there's some blue ink that's been picked up there that was sitting on top of the embossing. And then I'm going to stamp my flowers. There we go. I'm just going to go with one sprig of flowers this time. And then I've got the Thank You for Your Kindness stamp from that same Dragonfly Garden stamp set. I actually just want thank you, I don't want for your kindness. So I'm just going to quickly mask off the bit I don't want with a little bit of washi tape. You can use masking tape or low tack tape for this. So I'm literally going to cover over the words I don't want with the washi tape. I'm running my nail down in between the words I'm covering over and the words I want, just to make sure that I'm not covering over a tiny little bit of something I want. So the Y of you is a little bit covered there. Let's see if I can, that's better. I don't want to cover over the bottom of it, or I'll only have half a Y. There we are. So now I'm going to bring in my Bermuda Bay ink pad, which is just a little bit darker than Coastal Cabana, and ink my stamp. And then I'm going to get rid of the masking tape. That's really important, because otherwise the ink that's sitting on it will end up on your project. And then I'm going to stamp. I am just going to, I don't know why I've picked up quite so much ink on the edge of that stamp. It shouldn't come off when I stamp, but you never know. So I'm just going to take off the worst of that. Okay, and then I'm just going to stamp. There we go. So instead of it saying thank you for your kindness, it just says thank you. And then finishing the card is very, very simple, because all I'm going to do is just layer it up onto a layer of white, and then my card base. I don't very often use white as my background layer, but for this it just felt right. Give it this kind of, I don't know, delicate, almost ethereal feel. There we go, and I did pre-stamp and insert just with those same flowers. So there we go, that's card number 2. So I showed you the emboss resist technique, and then I did something very similar, although actually because I've used coloured embossing powder, of course you can't see the card base colour through the embossing. Oh, my tea is definitely cold now. Not so good cold. Alright, let's put that out of the way, put the lid on my embossing powder and clear the decks just a little bit. And then the final thing to show you with heat embossing is a technique called whitewash. Thank you, Belinda. I'm glad you liked that. The blending brush is absolutely, it's just practice. Just get some scrap card and just play around with them. I found that the key things really are to, once I've got the ink on the bristles, is to work them on something. A clear block is great because it doesn't absorb the ink, and that just distributes it evenly so you don't end up with any areas that have got more ink than others and therefore are going to be blotchy. And the second thing that I think really helps is using quite a light touch, moving your hand before you make contact with the card. Once you've made contact with the card, keep your hand moving. It's when you stop that you tend to end up with blotches. So those things hopefully will help you, but other than that, it's just practice, and I'm sure you'll get it very quickly. They are very user-friendly. So the whitewash technique involves heat embossing in white and then painting in between with white ink, and you do all of that on coloured cards. So I've used crumb cake card here. You can use any fairly pale coloured card. You end up with this very pretty, delicate look. So I'm going to do my heat embossing first and then my colouring in with white ink. So let me pull all the bits and pieces out. So I'm using the prized peony set for this. So I'm using the peony flower in there. I'm also going to use this little diamond dotty pattern in the background. And then I'm using, because I'm always making thank you cards, as you know, I'm using the thank you from Peaceful Moments. Must be my most inked set, I think, that one. And there we go. Couldn't find, I knew I'd cut out all the bits, couldn't find them for a minute. There we go. Alright, so let's move that away. So the first thing I need is a crumb cake layer. And because I'm going to heat emboss, of course, I'm going to use my embossing buddy all over this. And the white ink I'm going to use later on is the Whisper White Pigment ink. Now you can actually use this for heat embossing. Obviously you're going to get white ink down, but if you want a really, really white impression, you can stamp in white and then heat emboss in white. Or indeed you could stamp in white and then use clear embossing powder, and that would give you a white outline. But I'm actually going to use Versamark ink because it's just so reliable, and it's one I really love to use for heat embossing. But this is a pigment ink, which means it's slow drying, and so you can use this without needing Versamark as well if you want to stamp in white and have white embossing. But I will only be using it for my painting today. So I'm going to bring my ink pad to the stamp because the ink pad is smaller than the stamp, and make sure that I've got a really good coating of Versamark ink on there. And then I'm just going to stamp a little bit towards the top because I want to put my sentiment down the bottom. And it's quite a big stamp, so I'll give that a good push. There we are. And because I've got coloured card, you should be able to see that image, and it actually shows you the other thing you can use Versamark ink for without heat embossing at all, is to give you a kind of a watermark effect or a tone on tone effect of stamping. That can be really nice if you want a background pattern. Maybe you don't have an ink that works, that's the right colour. So instead of using crumb cake ink on crumb cake card, for instance, you can use Versamark ink on crumb cake card and you get a very similar look to it. So this is white embossing powder. Okay, so I've tipped that on. And now I'm going to heat it as before. And I'm also going to stamp my words down the bottom as well, so that I do all my heat embossing in one go. So I've got that thank you stamp. I'm going to put centrally. You can see that once you've got your heat tool warmed up, doing the actual embossing is ever so quick. It doesn't take very long at all to do that. Alright, so I'm going to bring back my white ink pad, and because I just want to use the ink, I don't actually want to use the ink pad. I could squeeze the box and that would push the ink pad onto the inside of the lid, but I'm actually just going to add a drop of the re-inker. You can see there's a little bit left from when I was doing my sample. This is a really thick glutinous kind of ink. I don't know if you saw that. And then you can either use a paintbrush and a jar of water, or better still an aqua painter, because you've got the water in there already and it's much more controllable. And then I'm just going to add just a drop of water just to dilute that ink a little bit, and then paint the white ink on. And because I've got that raised embossed line, it's actually very easy to paint inside the gaps, because the ink is contained by that embossed line, and the embossing gives you a very, well, totally opaque white design. And the part where I'm watercolouring on with white ink is less opaque, and so you get the difference in white tones. And then of course you've got the contrast of that white against the colour of the card. And you can do this quite quickly, because if you do get white ink on the embossing, it will actually resist, so it tends to kind of just fall back into the area you're colouring in. Now if you want to, once the white ink is dry, you can actually come over the top with a Stampin' Right marker, a water-based marker, and add some colour to the white, either everywhere or just in selected places. But I'm not going to do that today, because I do like the purity of the all white. You could of course just put a little drop of the re-inker onto a clear block and use that as your palette. I'm using the inside of the lid of the box, and then any excess will fall onto my ink pad and that will be fine. You can make a really pretty wedding card using this technique, or a christening card, depending on the images you chose. You could add some touches of gold, that would be really lovely. Although I'm just sticking with the white and crumb cake. You can see I'm working really quite quickly. I don't need to go slowly and carefully to stay within the lines because the embossing is containing that ink for me. You've all gone very quiet. Are you all still there? I hope you're all still there. I hope I haven't lost you. Not like the other week when the hail knocked out the internet. We haven't actually had any thunder. For all we've had a lot of heavy rain, we haven't had any thunder. There we go. So I think that's everywhere. So to clean off the brush, I quite often take it to the tap if I've used this white ink, but you can just squeeze out water from the barrel just to flush the ink off the tip. So that's got the worst of it off. I will do it, wash it properly under running water when I've finished here. Thank you, Belinda. I'm glad you like it. Yeah, I think it does make for a very elegant card. Now I'm just going to dry this off just so I can finish. I'm going to use my heat tool on setting 1 to dry the ink and keep a little bit of a distance away because I really don't want to overheat my embossing powder. And I am kind of wafting this around now because I'm drying rather than heat embossing. And drying a little bit from the back can help as well. Just helps to dry more evenly and more quickly. There we go. I think that's dry enough now for me to get on. I am just going to gently buff over the top with some kitchen paper, because as we saw in the last card, the ink can sit on top of that embossing. So I just want to make sure it's nice and glossy. There we are. So to finish it off, I'm going to just stamp a little bit of that diamond pattern using crumb cake ink, stamped off once. So I've got very little ink on there. I also want to make sure I've got that stamp on straight. Yes, it is on the block straight. So I'm going to stamp off. And then I'm just going to stamp a few little touches just to add a little bit of interest to the background. Making sure that I stamp off each time so the colour is consistent. go. I think that's enough. I really love this stamp. It's so subtle, but it just adds some texture. Alright, so now I just need to layer everything up. So Belinda's saying it's another technique on her list to try. She's wondering if you had, say, an outline stamp, you could emboss an outline in silver or gold on top of it. Not quite sure I'm understanding you right, Belinda. So are you able to reword that, and then I will do my best to answer. And I just stamped the inside. This is the same image that I used on the front, which I've just stamped in crumb cake, and I just did that beforehand because I had a feeling I'd be overrunning, which I am. So if I haven't lost you all, I've saved a minute or two's time there. There we are. Okay, so I have so much stuff on my desk, honestly, you would not believe it. But that's my card finished. Let me pull in all the cards I've made today and show you them together. So I hope if you haven't done heat embossing before that I've tempted you to have a try, or if you haven't done it for a while, I hope I've inspired you to dust off your heat tool and have another go, and maybe even given you one or two tips of things that you didn't know. So that's today's cards. So do let me know, Belinda, if you're able to reword your question. It's probably me, but I can't quite work out what you meant. Oh, here we go. Okay, so she's thinking of two-step stamps where one of the stamps is just the outline. Oh, right. Yes, yeah. So you could stamp the solid stamp in white, and then you could overstamp it with the outline and emboss that outline. Absolutely. Yes, you could. That would be lovely. Let me see what you make. Thank you, Belinda. I'm very glad if I've inspired you. So I'm just going to quickly move the camera back up and say goodbye properly. So as always, that means I have to cover you over just for a minute to avoid getting you seasick. Okay, I think you're still there. I think it was just me. I managed to shut off the picture, but as far as I can see, I'm still live. I'm glad it was useful, Belinda. Thank you. There we go. So thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a lovely weekend. Next Friday at 2 o'clock, I thought I would pull out my Stamparatus and do a little bit of Stamparatus stamping. So if you've got one handy, then you can dig yours out as well. I'll make a Facebook event and let you know if there's anything else that you need to have in case you want to craft along. If you haven't got a Stamparatus, I'll be showing you just one or two of the things that you can do with it. So I'll look forward to seeing you next Friday. Have a lovely weekend. I hope it dries up, but if not, get in your craft room and get crafting, and do share some photos with me. You can email them to me, handmade at home, that's all one word, handmade at home @hotmail.co.uk, or you can even pop them in the comments to this live. So thank you so much for joining me. It's really lovely to spend time with you, and I'll see you again soon. Bye bye.